blessed to be able to play in the number one basketball city in the world.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. And today's Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast is also brought to you by Indochino. Indochino is the world's most exciting made-to-measure menswear company. This week, all listeners to this podcast can get any premium Indochino suit for just $369 at Indochino.com when entering Locked On at checkout. My name is Josh Lloyd, and I am the lead fantasy analyst at BasketballMonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter, as always, at redrock_bball. The last 2 days, we have looked at point guards for positional tiers. We've looked at shooting guards for positional tiers. So, of course, today, we're looking at small forwards for the positional tiers. Michael Bolton.
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it indeed. And, of course, to talk about the small forwards and their positional tiers, Matt Smith from Basketball Monster is back. Matt.
Smitty.
It's good to have you back on.
Gosh, thank you. And I know who that quote was from.
Do you? Who was it?
It was LaMelo Ball talking about Wollongong.
Aren't they playing in Illawarra?
Which is in Wollongong, isn't it?
Is
Where
it?
their home base is.
Interesting. Because didn't there used to be two... Now, this is going to test my NBL knowledge. Didn't there used to be a Wollongong team and an Illawarra team? Or am I completely off on my regional New South Wales towns and geography?
I don't know. Well, I'm just looking at Wikipedia, which is the go-to source for all things.
Yeah. No, you're right. No, yep, I see that. It's a region encompassing the city. Illawarra is the region. Wollongong's the city.
And that is the mecca of basketball. So, yeah. Straight
down to the gong. I'm actually going. This is completely off the topic from small forward tiers. I'm going to see LaMelo here in a couple of weeks when Illawarra comes down to play Southeast Melbourne. And then the week after, Melbourne United's taking on the Breakers and RJ Hampton. So 2 weeks in a row going to see these potential top 10 NBA draft picks right here, 15 minutes from home, which is a little bit of a change from when how I'm normally viewing these draft prospects. But Matt, these aren't small forwards. These aren't small forwards in the NBA for this season. We're talking small forward tiers. You've already discussed the concept of tiers in the point guard tier podcast, so go back and listen to that. A lot of people ask, you see D'Angelo Russell, he's ranked 60th in 9-cat. When we're talking about it, we're not including turnovers. We've talked about that many times. And it's not that we're doing it for 8-cat leagues, because we believe when we're talking about these guys that when you're looking at draft rankings and projections, you shouldn't be factoring in turnovers. And there are numerous reasons for that. But that's why some of these guys may appear different than when you're looking at a fully weighted turnover category in your rankings that someone's 30 spots ahead. It is because of those turnover numbers. And it's not geared exclusively to 8-category leagues. When I draft in 9-cat leagues, I don't pay attention to turnovers. Matt, you don't even believe in punting, but you don't pay attention to turnovers either.
I don't, just because they're a negative category, and I strongly believe that if you want to be strong in all the major categories, you can't be strong in those categories and try to look after turnovers as well, because all the major ball handlers, there's probably only about 5 guys over the last 15 years who have been awesome up the top of the rankings and looked after your turnovers, guys like Anthony Davis, Chris Paul, Kawhi Leonard, Kevin Garnett, and Sean Marion's probably the other one that comes to mind with that low turnover count. But obviously, if you're having Russell Westbrook, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, James Harden, all these guys, they all have high turnovers. So it does distort those rankings a little bit, which is why we turn them off.
Yep, that is exactly right. And when you're at a game's disadvantage during a week, you end up being more competitive in turnovers anyway. So it does end up working. But anyway, that's not the point of this show. Let's talk about tiers, Matt. Let's talk about tier 1 for the small forwards. We have got 2 blokes in this group. One of those is the fun guy, Kawhi Leonard.
I'm a fun guy.
And the other is his new teammate, Paul George. Matt, these are 2 guys who are pretty confounding in terms of fantasy this year, but they are clearly, with Kevin Durant, into the 2 top small forwards in the group.
Yeah, no question about that late first, early second type of round. Plenty of load management risk here. We know Paul George has had that shoulder surgery in the off-season as well, so he could miss the first couple of weeks of the season.
Yep.
Still waiting to get some definitive news on that. But it's hard to see how both of these guys play more than, say, sort of 65 to 70 games per season, which means they'll probably end up being more suited to leagues with game limits. So you really need to keep that in mind, especially in head-to-head leagues. And Josh, I just think might just make the point as well that when we're looking at tiers, they're not equal across positions as well. So it doesn't mean that, the tier 3 and point guards will be the same overall value as tier 3 and power forwards. And this podcast and article will really show that for small forwards, there's not too many players early, but a lot later on as you work through the draft.
Yeah, someone asked me a question about that in my Good Bloke Patreon mailbag yesterday, talking about the lack of small forwards at the top, and it is pretty stark. But that also means that there's a ton of them that do come later in the draft. But in terms of that top level, it does push down pretty quickly into where that value drops off. I'm getting more and more in the camp of Kawhi Leonard not being rested as much as he was last season. Do you think he plays more than the 60 games he played last year? I think it's almost a guarantee.
Yeah, I'd definitely take the over on that. But what if we had the line at 68?
That's the mark. I think if you had it at 68, I would go a real soft over. If you had it at 70, I'd go a soft under. I think 65 is a strong over. But yeah, it does get tough around that 68 to 69 mark.
Giggity.
So that's where it does make it a little bit tough to get a full estimation on where these guys sit, and it does make them hard because they'd be first round guys. They're playing 75 games for a season. They're top 7, top 8 players really, really comfortably. But the decision you have to make at the end of drafts, and pick 8, absolutely the shittest spot to pick in any sort of league, I think this year, because you're just left with a crippling type decision. I think Embiid's probably the guy to go for, but you've gone with Drew in that spot before. People have gone with Beal. I'd consider Kawhi in a roto league even at that spot. It is a pretty tough spot, but these guys are clearly the number 1 and number 2 small forwards for this coming season. Let's go on to tier 2, Matt. Who have we got in tier 2?
A massive drop down the rankings with Otto Porter in Chicago. He's the only other small forward who falls inside the top 50 of our projections. An outstanding all-round fantasy game, particularly suited to rotisserie leagues. But yeah, you're going to have to make a decision early whether you pick one of these top-tier small forwards or whether you build around your point guards and big men, and then maybe later on in the draft you look at these other small forwards who we're going to get to shortly.
Porter, why do you think he's this consistently undervalued? Now, in the past, people have always looked at his 9-cat ranks and go, it means he's a second-round guy, and I've never bought into that. But he's still being 98 ADP on ESPN. Now, he's ranked 82 on ESPN, but for some reason, people are looking at him at the top of that queue at 82 and going, nah, I'm still not going to go for him. He's falling down to 98. That makes no sense. On Fantrax, he's at 73. I don't understand this. Now, Yahoo's got him at 33. I think that's probably about the right spot as a 3rd round, 4th round sort of player. Usage spiked in Chicago last season. The efficiency jumped back up. He shot 42% from 3 during his time there. He'd been a consistent 40% 3-point shooter. He generates steals at a high level. Why is there, outside of Yahoo, on Fantrax and ESPN, why is there a disrespect for Porter's game, do you think? Is it because he's not flashing in one category?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, because he is so even across the board, and his big advantage comes from those steal numbers. We've got him projected at 1.6, and I've already started writing my statistical scarcity article, and I can give you a little hint, Josh, that steals are actually the most readily available statistic throughout the draft. So that's probably one reason why you don't have to go early on Porter to secure those steals, because you can find them later on in drafts. And some of these small forward players will be part of that. We also look at guys like Marcus Smart as well. So yeah, I think that's exactly it. He's super across the board, and that's why he's good in rotisserie leagues, super efficient as well. But for head-to-head leagues, he just doesn't give you that big boost in 1, 2, or 3 categories, which is really key.
That point you made about steals is really, really interesting, because I'm in a $250 Red Rock league at the moment. I'm drafting with another guy because I don't have the time to take on more teams, so we decided to split the entry and split the management of the team. But anyway, that's beside the point. And we're talking about who to draft early on, and we're saying, well, we can go and get those different. We took Damian Lillard at pick 8 because he actually slid down to that spot for us. And then we, debating, we have to catch up defensive numbers. But you can get Delon Wright, you can get Larry Nance, you can get McCall Bridges in these later rounds who provide 1.6, 1.7, 1.8 steals. Joe Ingles gets you steals late. You can find those steals later on. And you'll find someone like Porter slip. You might find Covington slip, depending on what site you're drafting on. So you can find those numbers later on. But Porter still is a strong 4th, 3rd round sort of a player, and he is in that tier 2. And that just shows you, again, the lack of strength at the top of this small forward class. Of course, people will ask the question, where LeBron is in the point guard tiers. Giannis is in the power forward tiers. We can't have everyone crossed over into every situation. So when people ask, like they asked yesterday on the shooting guard one, well, where's DeRozan? On the point guard one, where's Drew Holiday? Well, they're in the next one up. They're at that position that they played the majority of their time. So we're going to hear about DeMar in today's show. Let's go on to tier 3. Matt, in fact, here is DeMar DeRozan. Who else is here with him?
Yeah, Chris Middleton from the Milwaukee Bucks and Gordon Hayward in Boston. Chris Middleton in particular, his minutes dropped by over 5 per game last season, which was a key factor in the decline in his value. It is hard to see him getting back to that 35, 36 minute range as the Bucks look to keep their players fresh for a playoff run. But really like Chris Middleton there, if you can find him around the 50 mark. DeMar DeRozan coming off a career year last season, particularly with those assist levels. I'm not sure they're sustainable with Deontay Murray and Derek White in the backcourt this season. And Gordon Hayward, if he's ever going to have a bounce back year, I think it'll be this year. His playmaking and experience will be much needed in Boston without Kyrie Irving and Al Horford. So, yeah, 3 pretty nice sort of safe guys there in the mid-rounds to get you started.
And again, Jimmy Butler is in the shooting guard tiers. The Italian cock, Danilo Gallinari.
Hands up, my cock!
He's in the power forwards. Robert Covington, power forwards. Jason Tatum, power forwards. Because this is where we expect them to play the majority of their time. I guess with Tatum and Hayward, you can interchange those guys. I think I do agree with you with Hayward. I think a real bounce back is on the cards for him this season. And I think that you're going to be able to get him relatively late on some sides. And he's going to provide a decent level of value for you. You've got DeRozan, who, again, I think there is going to be times when he is not able to be on the court for the Spurs just because of defensive issues, especially with some of these other players returning. Of course, that probably won't happen, but he struggled in the playoffs. He still can provide that value, but I think this might be the first time we see his scoring take even more of a dip. And Middleton's just really solid, but those minutes aren't going. They're not flying back up just because Brogdon's gone. Those Brogdon minutes and touches will be taken by other players. Budenholzer is not going to all of a sudden be like, nah, we need 37 a night out of Yanni and out of Chrissy Middleton. I just don't think that is going to be in the Budenholzer playbook. Tier 4, Matt. Who have we got here?
It's Tobias Harris from the Sixers, Jonathan Isaac from the Magic, Kelly Oubre from my Suns, and Karis LeVert from the Nets. I've already had a comment on the BBM website about Harris and potentially he could be up a tier, which
he could.
is true.
Yeah.
I guess, his just lack of defensive stats and the lack of steals in particular does hurt him, and there is just the slightest of gaps between Hayward and Harris, and that's why I've dropped Harris down a tier. But if you want to make the case and put him up a tier and then have a think about whether you'd rather Hayward or Harris, that's completely fine and something you guys should be thinking about when through your draft prep and heading into your leagues and your draft day. Kelly Oubre, he was really good last season when he joined the Suns. He was the 65th player overall in 8-cat during that time. 50 player this season, maybe.
Maybe.
Take your chance.
It's going to require him to do what he did over that 20 game stretch down the end to expand over a season. That's the worry with everyone back there with the Suns. Can those high defensive numbers stick? And the shooting, which was not really something he's done throughout his career, can that stick as well? I think he's got upside, obviously, but I just don't have him in that area at this point.
And another one of those guys who you can grab who will help you out in steals.
Yep.
And Karis LeVert, struggled when he returned late last season from that horrific foot injury, but put up some really good numbers in the Nets first round playoff series, and really enjoyed the discussion that you and Kyle had in your projections pod around, his ranking and numbers and efficiency in particular. And I love trying to target Karis LeVert in that 70 to 80 range. I think he could be in for a pretty strong season.
Yeah, look, LeVert is an interesting one, and go back and listen to that podcast I did with Kyle where we talked about the differences we have with him. I've got him at a couple extra minutes of what Kyle does. I just think that Atkinson's going to take the reins off a little bit in terms of playing time. No one's playing 36, but they'll go from that 30 to 31 to 32, I think a little bit more this season. As for Harris, people are like, well, Butler's gone. He's going to have to take on more scoring, and maybe that's true. He did see just a marginal dip in usage when he came from the Clippers to the Sixers, but what really impacted him was his three-point shooting, which completely disappeared. I think that'll come back, but we've also seen in the past with Harris is when he plays small forward and when he plays next to dominant rebounders, that his rebounding numbers fall off. It happened with Drummond. It went back up when he played with the Clippers, when he played power forward, and now he comes to play small forward next to Embiid and Horford. So I think his rebound numbers are going to come back down. I think the other reason for having Hayward there is I think with the absence of Horford, they're going to need a front court playmaker. Tatum's not that guy. Hayward can pass, he can create, he can distribute. So I think his assists are going to jump back up. So that's why I've got him there. But of course, you could easily have Harris jumping back ahead of Gordon Hayward. That would not be a stretch under any circumstance. And Isaac, another one of those blokes who provides those defensive numbers, who gets those steals, block shots, hits threes. I think he's in for a pretty big year this year. I'm not worried about the Chief Al-Farouq Aminu taking minutes away from Isaac. Isaac is a better player than Aminu, and he's obviously someone they want to develop for the future. So I think Isaac's role is going to be fairly secure for this coming season. Fingers crossed. Anyway, tier 5, Matthew. Got a couple of guys here, 3 guys in this tier. Again, a couple of those real steal specialists. Jingling Joe Ingles, McCall Bridges of the Suns, and Nicky Batum. People are really, really down on Batum for this season. So I'll let you let's take your thoughts on Batum for this coming year. Who was not good last season, but I think people don't realize when they say he was shit and say he was not good, they don't realize what that actually means.
Well, he ranked either just inside or just outside the top 100 after all of his shitness.
104th.
Right around the mark, and he's still standard league relevant.
Did it while scoring 9 points per game as well. He's 104th, scoring 9 points per game. So, yeah, it's not good from a Batum perspective because he hasn't been outside the top 100 in forever. But it's also not. We're not talking Tony Snell here. Like, this is still putting up numbers, and I think that's going to be able to even if his minutes drop this year, I think the production will increase.
And his value comes from other areas, a bit like a Marcus Smart, and you're targeting Batum for his threes and steals and assists and out of position blocks as well. But yeah, he did struggle at times, and he's even struggled at international level in the FIBA World Cup at the moment. So, but yeah, there is a chance that he bounces back, and he's heavily relied on this season in Charlotte with all those young kids around him.
There's also a chance he's finished. Maybe that's the case as well. But I have a little bit of faith in him as a very late pick because everyone's off him, and he provides value in those other areas.
Yeah, and if you can get him outside the top 100 again, then yeah, you might as well take that chance.
Yep.
Joe Ingles looks like he may come off the bench this season, Josh.
Well, that's what I've heard from some Jazz people. I talked to David Locke. He didn't seem to think that was going to be the case, but I have heard that in a few areas that potentially he comes off the bench and Bogdanovic and Royce O'Neal start, regardless of what it is. If he starts or comes off the bench, I think we're going to see a small minutes reduction from Ingles. He was playing like 31 a night. He is obviously older. I think we're seeing him as a 29 maybe minute a guy player for this season, which is not terrible, but it is going to have somewhat of an impact on his numbers. His shooting did drop last season, but his assists went sky high. I think that'll still be the case, and he's still going to be valuable. I just don't expect the 31, 32 minutes a night that we saw from him over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and assists are tough to find in this range. So, those 5 or 6 assists per game from Joe Ingles can be quite valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And Mikal Bridges averaged 1.6 steals and 1.3 threes in just under 30 minutes per game last season. Will likely come off the bench this season and back up both forward positions. But, hopefully he can take another step forward and build on those numbers and provide some more scoring as well.
The thing with Bridges, and someone mentioned this also on Basketball Monster, they said, how come you've only got him projected? He played 30 minutes a night last year, you've only got him projected for 30 this season, and Warren and Jackson are gone. My reasoning behind that is okay, that's fine, but we've also got a full season of Oubre. We've also got a full season of Devin Booker. We've also got a power forward who is an NBA player in Dario Saric, who's going to be playing those minutes. So it's not, we've got a full season of Tyler Johnson. We've got a point guard who isn't DeAnthony Melton. So all these minutes mean the more minutes that Rubio plays at point guard versus what Isaiah Kanan and DeAnthony Melton were playing means that Booker has to push to shooting guard. The more minutes that Booker plays at shooting guard means the fewer minutes that Bridges can play at shooting guard. The more minutes that Saric plays at power forward means the fewer minutes that Bridges can play at power forward. So it's not just Warren's gone and Jackson's gone, so 34 minutes a night for Bridges, because all those other guys, we're assuming they're playing for the majority of the season, and those roles are different. So it does all push all guys back. Now, he could easily exceed the 30 minutes I've got him at. He could play 31. I think he should start over Oubre, because I think Oubre is better suited as a sixth man. But I don't think that we should look at the 33 minutes a game that Bridges played over the final 24 games and thinking that's just a starting point from where he goes, because there were so many factors to whatever nonsense the Suns were doing down the stretch last season, Matt. I'm sure you would agree that that's not a realistic rotation they were running through March and April.
I definitely hope not. And Bridges is another one of those guys who low points per game numbers, don't look good on the surface. But yeah, you're not drafting him for his points. You're drafting him for his 3 steals and maybe half a block a game as well. So
there is hope that those blocks can go up as well, because he was at a pretty decent level in college. It just didn't translate over to the pros, much like his 3-point shooting. Tier 6. we have Brandon Ingram, the aforementioned TJ Warren, and Bojan Bogdanovic, now of the Utah Jazz. There's some differences in these guys here. People are a little bit critical of where I've projected TJ Warren. They think he's going to be back at those numbers that he was with the Suns. I obviously disagree with that. Ingram, some people look at him as, hey, maybe he's a top 50 guy. Others, I'm not touching him inside the top 150. So there's quite a bit of up and down there. Whereas Bogdanovic, I just don't think it's going to be possible for him to replicate what he did for the Pacers versus what he's going to be able to do for the Jazz.
I agree with that, with Mike Conley and Donovan Mitchell eating first and then Rudy Gobert inside. He'll be an important player to stretch that floor and knock down those threes, particularly in the corner. But, hard to see Zoo to provide some fantasy value. And TJ Warren just always finds a way to miss games as well. He's averaged 30 games missed over the course of his 5 seasons. So keep that in mind when you're looking at TJ Warren. And Brandon Ingram, I think he's going to be a prolific scorer with the Pelicans, but his poor free throw shooting really drags down his overall value.
There's also been talk of perhaps Ingram coming off the bench so that JJ Redick can start. I don't think that's what they're going to do, but also don't think he's going to be playing 37 a night, and there's chances he doesn't close games for this team. He doesn't shoot any threes at all. The free throw percentage is poor, and his defensive stats are really bad. How much he handles the ball remains to be seen. Of course, he's not playing alongside LeBron, but we're going to have Drew, we're going to have Lonzo. We're going to have Zion have the ball in his hands a little bit as well. But I think Ingram will get a chance to run that second unit quite a bit as well, which will help his value there. So I think if you had the choice between these 3 guys who are all projected at a similar level, who would you take out of these 3 guys?
I would take Brandon Ingram.
Yeah, so would I probably. It just depends. It also, of course, always depends on your team, but I think Ingram's the guy that I would go for here.
Yeah, I really love the Pelicans roster this season. We know the Pelicans will be sort of top 2 in that in pace again as well. Yep. Ingram's could get to 18, maybe 20 points per game, some rebounds. Really needs to boost those steal and block numbers as well. But he would be the one I think with the most upside in that tier.
Let's move on to the next tier. We're looking at tier 7. We have got 4 blokes in here. This is where we talk about how small. We're in tier 7 here, and these are blokes who are right at the end of drafts. But again, if you talk about, I need to get a small forward because I need to fill out that spot, you can still construct a team, grab a late small forward, whether it's a Bridges, whether it's an Ingles, whether it's one of these guys, and have that as being your guy, because they're not terrible options, but you don't have to just necessarily sell out to grab one of those early guys just to fill that position with a good player, because you can just put good players in your other spots.
You can. So tier 7, we have Danny Green from the Lakers, Jetty Osman from the Cavaliers, your favourite player, Andrew Wiggins in the Timberwolves, and Kyle Anderson with the Memphis Grizzlies, coming off an off-season shoulder surgery, which plagued him for most of last season. Your thoughts on Kyle Anderson's role this season, maybe in a backup off the bench type role?
Yeah, I think that's going to be the case. I think we're going to have Triple J starting at power forward. You're going to have Jay Crowder at small forward would be my guess, and you're going to have Anderson backing up both those spots. It's going to make it hard for Bruno Caboclo to play at all. But Anderson's chance to establish himself was last year. Bickerstaff dicked him around, and we didn't get to see that. Then the shoulder injury ended his season. So I think those 30 minutes a night that Kyle Anderson played last season, it's going to be hard for him to get back to that level. But still, again, a guy that can come off the bench and provide assists and steals and do it in enough volume to actually be a contributor in a standard league, obviously has that value. Even if it is 25 minutes a game. He can get you 1.6 steals, he can get you 4 assists. He might get you 7 points, but he can do those other things that can really help just to round out your overall squad. Whereas on the other side of that, you've got Andrew Wiggins, who might score 19 points a game and then do absolutely nothing else. But it must be said about Wiggo, and I've been critical of Wiggo, as has everyone else. His rebound numbers improved significantly last season under Ryan Saunders. The defensive stuff wasn't there, but can he get his confidence back? Can the shooting return? If he goes back from a 65% free throw guy to an 80% free throw guy, I think he's a top 100 guy.
Yeah, we've got him projected at just outside the top 130, and that's on 43% from the field and 68 from the free throw line. And just want to make a quick note on Danny Green as well. The Lakers have the second most quality games this season. So for everyone who's in a daily changes head-to-head league, Danny Green's going to be a super popular and very dangerous stream option, and can give you a pretty nice contribution in steals, blocks, and threes. And we know he can have a big game at times. So he'll definitely be a popular player that I have on my waiver wire weekly article this season.
What do you think about Chetty, who had a big opportunity last season? But I just think that the minutes will be there, but the usage won't be there with hopefully a healthy Kevin Love, with a more locked-in Colin Sexton, with an addition of Darius Garland. I just don't see that exact same offensive role for Chetty for this season.
I don't see that either, and made that point in my little blurb in the article as well. So it's just tough to see where his production comes from with those three guys that you've just mentioned.
Tier 8 is a big one, Matt. There's a lot of guys in this group. Run through them for me.
DeAndre Hunter with the Hawks, Jabari Parker with the Hawks as well, Mo Harkless with the Clippers, Kent Bazemore now with the Portland Trail Blazers, OG Anunoby in Toronto, Jay Crowder, who we mentioned in Memphis, Harrison Barnes at Sacramento, Marcus Morris with the Knicks, and finally Will Barton in Denver. I don't know if you want to mention each of them because there's not a real lot to talk about, but maybe if you had a favourite one or two from this tier, who would you look to target?
If I was taking an upside play, I think Parker's got no upside. Harkless not interested. Anunoby is an interesting one because I think he's going to at least play starter minutes. Crowder, we've seen what he does in starter minutes and it's not really useful. Barnes, we know what Barnesy does. And it's not all that interesting for fantasy. Maybe it's Barton. As much as I shit on Will Barton, it's mainly because I think he's overrated and I think that contract was poor, as people are realising now. But I think there is that upside, at least for him to get back into the mix, whereas I don't really see it for these other guys. Maybe out of the Jedi or Barton, they'd be the two that I'd look at. Who would you look at in this group?
It's definitely Anunoby for me with Danny Green and Kawhi Leonard no longer there. Has an opportunity to spend some time at both forward spots. Could be sort of that glue guy type of player. Just does enough in each of the categories, and once again those threes and steals and maybe some blocks. So I think out of everyone, he would be the one who I would target and take a flyer on.
Let's move on to the final tier. Only 9 tiers for the small forwards this season. Matt, round us out.
Rodney Hood from the Blazers, and we've got their Daniel House as well. From the Houston Rockets, and this is the type of in-depth player analysis that I bring to the table, Josh, that House will be the starting small forward in Houston, but he'll probably spend more time standing in the corner watching James Harden and Russell Westbrook than anything else. So not a real lot of fantasy value there, and Rodney Hood, potentially that starting small forward in Portland, could offer some points and threes, but tough to see how many shots per game he gets behind Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum.
Yeah, look, if I'm taking one of these guys, it's going to be Hood because there just is some scoring upside, which can be harder to find later on. House shot exceptionally well last season. I don't know how well that's going to carry over. I do agree he's going to play more. He's going to be the starter. He can provide some steals, but overall he's more just a stream type of an option, and this is really the back end of things. From a small forward perspective, Matt, that'll wrap us up for looking at the small forward tiers. We'll be back tomorrow to look at power forwards, and then back early next week to look at the center tiers. Let everyone know where they can find you on Twitter and what's happening for you over at Basketball Monster.
You can find me on Twitter at SManSports. As you mentioned, we'll round out power forward tiers and centre tiers. They'll be up on the website within the coming day/week. And then that statistical scarcity article, which I'm about halfway through, that'll be up at some point too. After that, who knows what we're right about, but it will be gold, Josh. You know that.
Always. There's always good stuff over at Basketball Monster. Matt, thank you for jumping on again.
Thank you.
All right, guys, don't forget, subscribe to this podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and on YouTube, hit the thumbs up, leave a comment, reply, share with your friends, all that sort of stuff. And you can become a Patreon as well for one of the exclusive Patreon mailbags. There are 2 of those a month. That's patreon.com/redrock_bball. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Torian Prince.